So here we are, everybody. We should know within the next 48 to 72 hours of the outcome of the FTC versus Microsoft federal trial for the acquisition of Activision. And to take a quick look at what direction I think the outcome is going to be, at least in my opinion, I wanted to recap the closing arguments that took place on the final day of the trial, where the FTC was essentially roasted by the judge, or as Tom Warren over in The Verge referred to as a grilling, and he is quoted in saying in his observation of the courtroom that it felt like the Microsoft team was sitting there watching the FTC tie itself in knots over its core argument and just enjoying the spectacle. So we are going to take a look at that spectacle right now and review what took place. One of the first questions the judge had for the FTC was the fact that the FTC is continuing to go on the warpath for the theory of harm of console exclusivity for Call of Duty, which can affect PlayStation and other competitors. And the fact that the FTC is still the only regulator left in the world that is worried about this theory of harm. And the fact that also the FTC relied heavily on Sony to create this theory of harm and to pretty much help craft a lot of its arguments towards Microsoft, which means that the judge really noticed that the FTC relied upon a major competitor in the gaming industry to help shape and craft the FTC's case. The FTC lawyer opened with the following statement in their closing arguments. All the evidence is showing, Your Honor, that the Call of Duty and AAA games in particular and some of the other Activision franchises drive gamers. The majority driver by far for the synergies from Microsoft come around from driving users to engage in join Game Pass because they understand the value of this content. You've also heard quite a bit about decisions involving ZeniMax. The evidence, Your Honor, is the evidence of Microsoft's incentives when it comes to valuable content. One of the main things about this statement point out about how the FTC are extremely concerned about Microsoft pushing people to Game Pass and creating harm to competitors like Sony. But this is where their closing argument lacked one thing, and that is the theory of harm to consumers, which Judge Corley even pointed out at one time in stating it's not about the harm to Sony we care about, it's the harm to consumers. And Judge Corley also wanted to know whether we'd even be there if Microsoft and Sony decided to actually sit down and sign the agreement that Microsoft has been offering Sony all along, and the fact that Sony has been completely reluctant to even talk to Microsoft. Now, according to Tom Warren, the judge's line of questioning for the FTC didn't ease up there, with her mentioning that 62% of all PlayStation owners don't play Call of Duty at all, when she referenced the data provided by Elizabeth Bailey, Microsoft's own economic expert, and she quoted in saying they're not going to miss it. The foreclosure won't affect them, and she wanted to know from the FTC why they established Call of Duty was so important and whether the FTC's own economic expert, Robin Lee, had actually looked at the real-world data in his own models that he provided to the courts. According to Tom Warren's synapse of everything that took place, from his summary, the FTC lawyer struggled to respond here and referenced PlayStation chief Jim Ryan's testimony instead of answering the question related to Lee's testimony. The judge stated, "That's not what I asked." The FTC lawyer then continued to struggle and explain Lee's report so much that another FTC lawyer had to step in and try to get things back on track. And this is just one of the disheveled moments that took place during the closing arguments, proving that the FTC really did not have all their ducks in a row and a proper case lined up to fight Microsoft's well-planned out legal team and the arguments that they provided to go against the FTC's theory of harm. Then the FTC lost out on their failure to somehow convince people that the PC and Nintendo shouldn't be part of the high-end console gaming market. And the judge was quick to point out that a lot of people can switch to PC if they wanted to, and that also the Nintendo Switch is a competitor because it's around the same price point as the Xbox Series S at $299. The judge then asked the FTC lawyer to please name a game from the ZeniMax catalog that would be comparable to Call of Duty from Activision. And in the FTC lawyer's genius, he yelled out Elder Scrolls Online, which was a completely stupid and asinine reply, considering that since ZeniMax was purchased, the Elder Scrolls Online franchise has remained multiplat, and the game has also received continuous updates and support over on the PlayStation side. Clearly frustrated at this point, Judge Corley decided to once again hammer home about Call of Duty seemingly being the entire focus of these proceedings, and that how this is all over one shooter video game. We are concerned about having competition for this one shooter video game, stated Judge Corley. And then she went in to have some key exchange with the FTC lawyer, starting with Judge Corley. What do you say, though, to Mr. Ryan, who said that Starfield, whatever, referring to Starfield, there was nothing anti-competitive about Microsoft making that exclusive under what you just said to me that is anti-competitive? The FTC responded with, I don't know the basis for why Mr. Ryan was less upset about that one than Call of Duty, with the judge cutting them off and sternly saying, because he does the same thing. The conversation then transferred over to the cloud market, where Microsoft was keen to point out that the FTC is struggling to figure out what the harm is, so they're turning to the judge or Microsoft and saying that you should figure it out because it's too hard for us, referring to how the FTC really can't figure out how this is going to affect competition in the cloud market because it's an emerging market with very little data, and so therefore the FTC is just assuming, but they want Microsoft and the judge to figure out exactly how that's going to work. This is where Microsoft's law team really wanted to hammer out the argument that Microsoft is not only helping grow, but support the cloud gaming market because of all the 10-year agreements that they've hatched out with other competitors and providers. But the FTC has continually asked the courts to ignore these agreements because they're arguing that Microsoft may claim these deals are important, but there is no analysis to prove that, and nobody is saying that these deals are magnificent. But Judge Corley cut in to point out that NVIDIA had testified and stated that it's happy and that it will reduce costs for NVIDIA. And then she asked the FTC, won't that enable them to better compete with Microsoft's xCloud? That's pro-competitive, right? That's where the FTC then argued about how Microsoft can make certain titles exclusive to their cloud platform, which could hurt smaller guys. And even if Microsoft also included PlayStation Plus with their offerings to allow Call of Duty to be licensed over there, that it would also just make it to where the market existed only between Microsoft and PlayStation. But that's where Microsoft argued that exclusives happen all the time, and even Satya Nadella even claimed that he doesn't want to live in a world of exclusives, but it has to because of Sony, and it has made it a part of competition, and it is not part of any anti-competitive behavior. The Microsoft lawyer then stated to the judge, with all these other streaming services, they are all going to have the ability to stream the game, which they don't have today. And this is where Judge Corley talked to the FTC and stated, in some sense, you won and got what you wanted. You forced them into enter these agreements, with the FTC replying, we have evidence that there are agreements, but we do not have any evidence of anything beyond the agreements. And then the judge wanted to say, why would NVIDIA do what they did, say what they did? They're a competitor to Microsoft in cloud gaming, so why did they do it then? The FTC replied with, that doesn't count under the law because it's not merger specific. The deal would have been achieved whether we were here or not. It was a sweetener. This is where the Microsoft lawyers argued with the FTC and stated that the FTC's arguments and skepticism of the cloud contracts is absolutely absurd. And Judge Corley even agreed with Microsoft in stating to the FTC that they won by forcing Microsoft into those agreements once again. But the FTC also continued to argue, as usual, that they don't believe they feel they won and that this is no legal victory at all. The judge moved the final part of the conversation towards subscription services specifically, and was quickly to point out to the FTC that by Microsoft adding Call of Duty to their subscription service Game Pass, it could pressure Sony PlayStation to add God of War Ragnarok and other titles like that to their subscription service PlayStation Plus. And she even quoted in saying, "I don't understand why Sony won't make its PlayStation Plus subscription more better," pointing out that PlayStation is completely refusing to want to compete with Microsoft in any level because of their market dominance. But there was also one final exchange between the judge and Microsoft specifically, with the judge starting off and saying, "We wouldn't be here if Microsoft made Call of Duty. It's the purchasing, right? We don't benefit from just buying up each other. We benefit from keeping things separate and therefore incentivizing people to create themselves." Microsoft's lawyer responded with, "That's not true. We want smaller groups to create content, right? And the fact that someone purchased, and they are not small anymore, Activision, they produce popular content and someone else wants to buy it to distribute it. And then someone else wants to make more content, and that's what the art of what's going on. Whether it's movies, gaming, television, no one says if you don't have this one game or this one television program or movie, you can't compete." So one thing is apparent after all the closing arguments between the FTC and Microsoft, and the fact that the FTC is completely disheveled and disorganized from not being able to provide a proper argument, and the fact that they did absolutely no homework in how the gaming industry works, and the fact that the judge picked up on all of that, making it seem like the judge just might side with Microsoft in the end and deny the FTC their preliminary injunction. But we can also say this is anybody's guess. All we can do now is wait for the judge to make her final decision, which will take place in the next 48 to 72 hours, and we can finally see if this deal is going to press forward with the only roadblock that will be left will be the CMA, or is the deal going to be completely done with the FTC receiving their preliminary injunction. This is that part where I remind you that if you enjoy the content here and keeping up with gaming news related stuff, please like, subscribe, comment down below, all that good fun stuff that YouTube likes to see. Also, please check out my video end card and take a look at my last video, explore my channel. And I always have to end off with telling everybody, because I do believe it in my heart, that we need to ignore these console wars and that we should always play the games we love on the platforms we prefer. I am Centurion 1307, and thank you for watching.